After Gojira dominated the 2024 Olympic opening ceremonies, it got me thinking about other times that were actually televised and everyone could get behind when metal bands were performing. So this video is going to talk about 10 great live TV metal performances. I'd love to include Gojira's Olympic performance on this list, but if I even try to show a second of video from the performance, the entire video will get claimed and blocked. That's been happening for over a week now to others. Gojira is awesome, deserves endless respect. YouTube is being YouTube again. Previous video, I talked about terrible rock performances on live TV. You can check that out in the link in the video description. Just like that video, I'm not including Saturday Night Live performances because, just like the Olympics, NBC Universal will have a fit and have the video taken down. Also, a while back, I did an entire video featuring bands that Conan O'Brien had on his show over the years, so this video will not include many of those performances to add variety. Check that video out in the comments though and see how Conan O'Brien gave its spotlight to rock and metal bands. This video is not a top 10, no ranking, just a list. You know how these videos work. Let's get to it. For a band who's been around for decades and one of the dominant sides of the Big Four, it wasn't until 2017 that Slayer made their late night appearance. And of all shows, it was The Tonight Show with plain vanilla Jimmy Fallon. Nothing says metal like Jimmy Fallon. Introduced to an excited crowd, Slayer gave a solid performance with full TV production for Raining Blood, which is the right choice to show off Slayer to Fallon's very safe audience. I mean, even that audience knows Raining Blood. Slayer looked and sounded great, the audience was into it, and it was a long-awaited first for the band. Apparently, Slayer was also the last of the Big Four to ever appear on The Tonight Show regardless of host. Better late than ever, I suppose. Keep in mind, it was only a few months later that Slayer would announce their multi-leg retirement tour. Wild to see that happen, since this is also the year that Slayer is returning for one-off performances such as Riot Fest. Retirement is only an idea, never a permanent thing in metal. Before The Daily Show, there was The Jon Stewart Show on MTV, and before music television went to non-stop reruns of Ridiculousness and Catfish, there was actual music. In true 90s fashion, this show was a daily point of news in all types of music, including heavy artists and bands like the bonkers Faith No More. It's a shame Jon Stewart didn't get the flowers he deserved in the early and mid-90s, along with Faith No More, who did so much in an unorthodox way. Faith No More was much bigger outside of the US and the MTV audience, but Jon Stewart gave Patton and company camera time, and that's all that was needed. The performance was the perfectly chaotic showing you would expect. Digging the Grave was probably not what the home audience was expecting, but this was a raw, frenetic performance, and Mike Patton was moving around as if there was an earthquake, all without losing his timing. Faith No More sounded great, even with poorly transferred VHS copies of the years going back to 95. No pre-record, just a group knowing how to get into their own world and play their hearts out to a loving studio audience and the probably terrified MTV crew and executives who were afraid for their lives that night. Jimmy Kimmel has been hosting his late night show for a long time, and through that tenure, there was always a showcase of heavy music, especially as the years have gone on. That includes giving A Day to Remember their national TV debut, just as What Separates Me From You was dominating. A Day to Remember performed All I Want with the sponsored studio stage. This was years before the summer concert series Kimmel does every year. 2011 was the explosion for A Day to Remember, and Jimmy Kimmel's team usually does a good job keeping an eye on bands like that. All I Want was the perfect song to perform. It was slightly subdued considering the time frame and what A Day to Remember used to be known for with live shows, but the Ocala band still sounded great. It was a clean performance made appropriate for television, and it was a good showing for a still young band who finally escaped Florida and can show the world what they were capable of. This was the fun era of A Day to Remember, where the world was a touch brighter for bands like this, and it was awesome to see this clip from early 2011. It was also the era where heavy bands were given more chances on TV, and these spots were not reserved for industry plants. The good old days. Let's keep going with Jimmy Kimmel, as a few years later, when the summer concert series and outdoor concerts for musical artists started happening, Lamb of God got the chance to get ABC a bit heavy. Hearing Lamb of God on TV is always something special, as networks rarely would allow Randy Blythe's vocals and the slightly extreme sound of Lamb of God to be broadcasted, especially on a network owned by Mickey Mouse. Jimmy Kimmel showed off Seven Sturm und Drang, and the happy California crowd got a good dose of what Richmond, Virginia offers. The polite circle pit in the crowd, the Samsung branding, it was all not the typical visuals of Lamb of God, but the band still sounded amazing. There were a lot of horns in the air on command, which was cool to see, and Mark Morton's solo was killer. It was a great showing of metal on a sunny California day. Even if I joke about that crowd, they were there for Lamb of God and a smaller concert while Lamb of God performed live, which is something awesome that the show has done for years now. More Lamb of God on TV is better, regardless of the show or song or dread length. He cut his hair recently again. Remember Jay Leno? Yeah, I'm not a fan either. When Jay Leno ran The Tonight Show, both times, it was always a true variety show, and that included musical spectrums. So when Motorhead made an appearance on The Tonight Show in '92, it was not necessarily out of left field. It just seems that way because Jay Leno is about as metal as Jason Aldean. But when Lemmy shows up, he delivers, and that goes for Motorhead as well. Seeing a band like this shout through Going to Brazil with a studio crowd that was there for Motorhead was definitely a cool thing to see in '92. Watching Lemmy perform like this with his presence and swagger was also great. Less than 3 minutes was all that Motorhead needed to blast out TV speakers that night, and for one of the few brief moments in time, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno was actually a fun time to watch, and you were glad you saw it. Motorhead had many TV performances, as Lemmy was such a visual character and the music always held up. There was a great look back in time at how long Motorhead had lasting power, even with the scope of music was drastically changing. Trends come and go in music and TV, but Motorhead, that's timeless. Mastodon getting on Late Show with David Letterman almost sounds made up, but it happened more than once. I'm pointing out their second performance from 2011 when even Mr. Letterman, who loves to give rock and metal bands a hard time, was polite and gave it up for what the band could do live. Mastodon performed Curl of the Burl with a true full band performance, as it is the Mastodon standard. Groove metal straight out of Georgia performed in Manhattan to an older audience. On paper, that sounds like a long shot, but Mastodon sets that thick groove and everyone starts singing in and it all becomes hypnotic. Mastodon is much more accessible than many non-metal fans could ever give credit, and being able to pull off a Late Show performance in 2011 is further proof of that. The back and forth, the riffs, it all came through well, and Curl of the Burl was a great introduction for Mastodon to another national audience. The group is always great live, and it's weird to see Letterman walk up and crack a joke to the band after the song, and the band just awkwardly smile because they have no idea what's going on. I mean, hey, a non-Big Four metal band making it on Letterman is good enough for me. Let David Letterman make whatever joke he wants.
Let's all go over to Clooney's hotel and tease him a little bit. That was my idea.
Another show that did not get enough credit for variety and musical guests was the Arsenio Hall show. I was barely walking at that point, but looking back at the cultural importance of Arsenio Hall at the time, and him having a group like Megadeth and other metal bands on says volumes. This was also 1990 Megadeth, where Dave Mustaine was proving to everyone just how big of a deal he was years after Lars gave him the boot. Rust in Peace, Hangar 18 Megadeth, the Megadeth that even Megadeth haters know was the good stuff, and Mustaine and company nailed it on a big stage. Megadeth and Arsenio Hall may not be synonymous names in entertainment, but this performance of Hangar 18 was killer. Loud, crunchy guitars and solos, all leveled right to make sure the home audience gets exactly what Megadeth sold best. It was a great showing of the band with arguably their best album. This performance is a Time Travelers episode to see Arsenio Hall and Megadeth right before the grunge explosion and where thrash was still dominating so many metal fans' lives. Hangar 18 getting national TV attention with a big audience that was the focus of true popular television. Everything checks out great. I'm a big fan of Stephen Colbert's work, going back to the Colbert Report and Daily Show years, and even though The Late Show with Colbert does not have a ton of heavy music on rotation, they do like to make a spectacle when it happens, including having Ghost on Halloween. This was Colbert's first year as host, and that Halloween he dressed up and had Ghost perform the eventual Grammy-winning Cerise with full presentation of Papa blessing worshippers and grainy film effects. This was the best timing with the best band to make everything come together for a Halloween TV spot. Ghost's performance was great, including the guitar solo and Papa's vocal delivery embellishing on long notes. I don't know if the full audience was in on the gimmick of Ghost and what was happening, but I like to imagine they were all converted that night and also got Papa's blessing, or curse, whatever he wants to call it. I also love that on Colbert's first year, Ghost came in as the representative metal band and gave what would have been the most horrific satanic panic performance ever had it been 30 years prior. Just imagine Ghost performing this in the 80s on TV. It would have had a full network shutdown at that point. For years, Channel 4 was pushing boundaries in England, and that including having rock and metal bands on their show, The Word. In 1993, with a ton of hype behind a young politically charged Rage Against the Machine, someone at Channel 4 approved the group to perform Killing in the Name. This was 93 television getting a live performance of Killing in the Name from Rage Against the Machine. I don't care what country that's in, it's a bold step. Keep in mind also, The Word was a show that introduced Rage with a middle finger from the host, so that's a proper tone to set for the band to get the final lines out of the song. It was uncensored, angry, and the audience quickly started participating. 90s green screen technology and wild patterns meant to add a fun, vibrant feel somehow only made the setting look more unhinged, and seeing Tom and Tim get really into the playing while Zach was singing directly to the small audience looked amazing. Not a chance this would fly now, especially in the United States. Especially with Rage performing Killing in the Name. Especially with the host flipping off the camera to lead them in. 90s wanted to be alternative and culture changing, and they succeeded. It sounded great, looks like a wild fever dream. It's the perfect 1993 snapshot. I may not be able to show the Olympics one, but Gojira on TV is always worth pointing out. It was in 2021 on the French news and talk show Quotidien, meaning every day, that France's favorite metal band got to perform for their daytime audience. It was mainly to promote the upcoming album Fortitude and to play Amazonia. The song would later get Grammy nominated. Fortitude would be one of my favorite albums of 21, and everyone in the Western Hemisphere missed out a bit for not seeing this on TV. Quotidien is advertised as providing news, culture, and humor. Gojira took the culture side of that and proved once again that France really does have the grounds to stand as a supportive metal country. Amazonia sounded great with the performance, and the production crew all did a good job with editing and presentation as well. Everyone in the US still has the wrong idea about France being snooty and dirty. I disagree. If anything, we've learned that France knows how to keep their culture and stand by what the French do best: growl and scream to heavy riffs. I like to imagine France is nothing but metal music over the last few years. I do hope metal bands can perform on live TV and regular TV shows somehow. If the Olympics can have Gojira steal the show, then it's possible for other bands as well, so long as networks are willing to have them perform. I mean, it could happen. Slipknot on CNN, Powerwolf on Nickelodeon, get crazy with it. There are many more examples, so please drop a comment with a link to other live TV performances from metal bands. You can check out that video focusing on bands appearing on Conan shows over the years right here in the video description and on the side. We need more metal and Conan-like people on TV.